everyone, and welcome to today's Sam at Home panel, where we will be discussing storytelling with behind the camera creatives. My name is Chris Villan, and I am an actor and content creator, and I'm so excited to be with you today. This is going to be such an amazing panel. We have incredible creatives lined up for you who are going to talk about their work in your favorite film and television projects. So let's jump right in. First up, he has directed episodes for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Never Have I Ever, and Julie and the Phantoms. Please welcome Kabir Akhtar.
Hi, that's me.
What's up? Thanks for being here. Next, she designed the looks and outfits on the film Synchronic and The Wretched. Please welcome Laura Cristina Ortiz.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Next, he scored the music for series including Pen 15, Jurassic World, Camp Cretaceous, and co-composed the music on Cobra Kai. Please welcome Leo Birenberg.
What's up, everybody? I'm very happy to be here.
Next, she is an Emmy-nominated hairstylist and the founder of Beyond the Combs Academy. Please welcome Rhonda O'Neal.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Next, he is the founder and CEO of Chicken Bone Effects, the team behind the visual effects of Westworld and Godless. Please welcome Johnny Renzulli.
Hi there, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Next, he is the director at Lucan Studio, the studio behind the amazing animated series Isaura. Please welcome Andrew McNally.
Hi, greeting you from Cape Town, South Africa.
Last but certainly not least, he is a wildlife filmmaker, presenter, and cinematographer, and most recently captured some amazing shots on BBC's Earth's Nature documentary series, 7 Worlds, 1 Planet. Please welcome Bertie Gregory.
Hey everybody, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, you guys, so we're going to start off. This is a question for everybody. What is a creative challenge you've overcome or a creatively rewarding moment from one of your most recent projects? Let's start with Leo.
Well, I'm working on and just finished the first season, and it just came out. They showed Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, which is part of the Jurassic Park universe. And honestly, really intimidating challenge to get pulled into writing music for Jurassic Park. One of the most iconic franchises with some of the most iconic music of all time. So I kind of had to dive in and figure out, like, how am I going to do this and not have it just, one, be fan service, which is not what I wanted to do. I didn't just want to rehash all the music from the original. Two, make it sound like kind of like a budget Jurassic Park, like, oh, like every piece of music sort of sounds like a John Williams piece. So I sort of, in writing the music, tried to not be like, what would he have done here, but think like, what do I think inspired John Williams in approaching this scene? And then I'm just going to do my own thing for that.
Rhonda, same question. What about yourself?
So before the pandemic, I was on Perry Mason. I wasn't in the trailer. I'm in the tent with at least 300 to 400 background. And we have to do what the department head said, 1939 hairdos. We had to hurry up and do 300 background. Some of the ladies that came in, a lot of people don't know that when you have African Americans that are all filled with big afros like my hair, this is not what they wore in 1939. So I had to sculpture it into a 1939 hair look. And I had to do it. I mean, it's okay to do it, but when you tell me 20 minutes, there I have it. And I'm glad, okay. But it was fun and rewarding all at the same time. And I love those type of challenges.
Laura, I want to move down to you and your amazing costumes in the background.
Thank you. These are some fun personal projects that I wanted to showcase. But in terms of a most rewarding moment in terms of overcoming a challenge on Synchronic, the film that I worked on with Anthony Mackie and Jamie Jordan. There's a whole time travel mechanic in the film, and the directors and I discussed that anytime somebody time traveled, the clothes are going to distort, as well as props and things like that. So I collaborated with the production designer as well as them to really work out what that aesthetic would be, and we came up with some really crazy concepts. So then the challenge was how to actually physically create these costumes, also on an indie film budget. And so there was inspiration by looking at a 2013 haute couture collection by Iris van Herpen, where she used like polyurethane foam, steel filings and magnets to almost like sculpt the foam on the fabric. And so we tried emulating that in our indie budget world version for Anthony Mackie's costumes throughout the film, and which was really, really intense, but really fun because, you know, I'd never done something like that before. It's really cool when the directors, like when the actor arrives to set in the costume and they're like, that looks like freaking dope. And then, and also like when the actor, you know, actor or actress, you know, when they say, they're like, this like makes me feel like I'm here in this moment, like in the film narratively. And that is really like the most special thing, because it's a tool for actors as well as something, you know, that you want to help drive the story narratively on the screen. So yeah.
All right, Kabir, you are next on my list here. Tell us some stuff.
You know, when you show up to direct an episode of television, it's different than showing up to do like a movie or a pilot or like anything like something that's sort of starting from scratch. The great advice that I was given, I can't take credit for it, but I loved it so much, this is years ago, was that you show up to do something like this, you're trying to fit in to this world. It's like they give you a piece of paper with a circle on it, right? And your job is to color in the circle however you want. They just say, bring us back a circle. So, you know, last year I directed a couple episodes of Never Have I Ever on Netflix. And, you know, the same thing. I did like the 5th and 6th episode. It's a new show. You're just trying to like emulate the style and elevate where you can, do some cool camera stuff and like storytelling stuff. But in one of the episodes is about a totally different main character with a totally different narrator, and had a whole different tone to it. And I was like, you know, what can we do to sort of really showcase this kid's life as a side character and really, you know, engender as much empathy as we can for him. And shoot it differently. Like, let's take the visual style. I'm just going to go over here a little bit. You know, up to that point, he had kind of been the bad guy in the show. But it was a lot of fun to find ways to like sit back, shoot these massive wides, like use different lenses and like have a different color palette for this whole episode to really illustrate how this kid who had been a total jerk actually was, you know, you understood like what was wrong in his life. You came away, people came away rooting for him. And I felt like, you know, that kind of opportunity is, look, I mean, that's what's wrong with the planet right now, is that we don't have enough empathy for other people with the different backgrounds and different points of view, and we don't take the time to understand what's going on around us. So the fact that that episode turned out as well as it did, and, you know, Netflix chose to submit it as their choice for, you know, directing, as their directing entry for the Emmys, which I was very excited about.
Bertie, I want to jump to you next.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge in wildlife film creatively is really just getting the actors to read the script. Real inconvenient. Having these stories that you've spent maybe years researching and then turning up on location and the animals aren't doing that. And I think the big challenge is learning to let go and letting the animals, there'll be a story that they're going to tell you, and usually it's better than the one you had in mind. I mean, in the case of Seven Worlds, well, there were rumors that basically there was this whale gathering, a whale aggregation in Antarctica, which is rumored to be the biggest gathering of whales on the planet. And it's a thing that the BBC has been trying to film for years. I spent 2 months down there, and 1 month and 3/4 went past and I hadn't seen it, and was like, I don't want to let down David Attenborough.
Oh no.
On one of the last days, we on the horizon saw these what looked like cannons going off out the ocean, and it was all these big fin whales, second biggest whale on the planet, 150 of them all together going after krill, and thousands of penguins and albatross. It was yeah, it was epic, but it would be great if they could just do that on day one.
Kabir, I want to jump back over to you. Can you speak to the transition of jumping from editor to director, and how did the skills you learned as an editor help you when directing projects like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and Never Have I Ever?
Well, I mean, the transition is, it's funny, I get asked this question a lot. You know, I had a lot of friends, you know, acquaintances, I guess, who at some point were like, wow, you know, you were like editing all these reality shows 9 years ago, and now you've like, you know, won an Emmy and you're directing and producing all this big name like narrative content, and it just like happened. And I'm like, it did not just
whoa. First of all,
and so much like for any of us moving from like, you know, one genre to another, or one job description to another, or one department to another, you know, ultimately it's about being good at what you do, and being supported by someone above you who's in a position to take a chance on you, and trying to minimize the amount of chanciness it is for them, right?
Johnny, can you talk about the high-level collaboration between visual effects vendors and the project's creatives, and like what type of work and technical awareness does it take to bring the creative vision to screen?
I think collaboration always starts with listening, and as the process goes on, there are more and more and more people involved. And I think the thing is, how do we keep the message consistent as more and more people get involved in the project? I think it's just frankly a lot of listening, and there's a lot of you have to ask good questions, but I think you're listening a lot more often than you're speaking. The real message is coming from the creatives, sitting at the top of the project and giving us feedback, and us making some mistakes, and going and trying some things over again.
Bertie, I want to ask you, oftentimes when we're watching nature documentaries, I think to myself, how did they know the animal was going to do that? Or how did they know when or what to record? Can you tell us what is it really like to shoot a wildlife documentary?
I think, unlike lots of other genres of cinematography, whilst your technical ability is important, but if you don't know how to find the animal in the first place, you are completely useless. So I think the key is actually having the field craft and spending the time to understand animals. On a shoot, a lot of the time I'm filming an animal I've never seen before, but I'll be drawing on experience from other animals. So if I'm filming a polar bear for the first time, well, I might never have filmed a polar bear, but I'll know how a brown bear and a black bear moves, and trying to figure that out. Often we're working with scientists or guides, and they know best, and so you really want to listen to them. And so often, whilst we get to take the credit for getting the shot, really it's the scientist or the researcher. I mean, in the case of Seven Worlds, we were trying to film beluga whales. It's like a big white whale with a funny forehead called a melon. We were trying to film them in the water, and every time I got in the water with them, they'd kind of swim over to me for a bit and then just swim off. And when we were driving in the boat, they'd like stay right next to the boat and were really into the boat. And we were like, well, how are we going to do this? And the boat captain said, well, if they're interested in the boat, not you, why don't we just drag you behind the boat? I was like, okay. So he put a rope around my feet and dragged me like 20 feet behind the boat facing backwards. And the belugas were following the boat, and then I was moving, and they were like, oh, there's this weird thing that's kind of interesting.
This sounds totally safe.
Yeah, this sounds definitely, we don't need to call the insurance company about any of this.
And then it just got more and more ridiculous, because the guy then said, hey, another top tip. And I thought he was just pulling my leg, quite literally, excuse the pun. I thought he was saying, so he was like, oh, well, one thing the belugas really like is they're really vocal. So if you sing to them through your snorkel, they'll come closer and be more interested in you.
So did you do it?
Yeah. So I tried Adele, and what did I try? Star Wars. And actually, I'm not even lying. I tried the Jurassic Park theme tune, and they loved it. They hate the British national anthem and Star Wars.
All right, Rhonda, you founded Beyond the Combs Academy, which strives to educate the next generation of hairstylists on how to style all hair types. Can you tell us a little bit about why you started this academy and what you hope the industry learns from it?
Well, the reason why I started Beyond the Combs Academy is because I've been in the industry in the union, IATSE, for about 20 years now. And I department head shows and films. And I find that in trying to put my show together, I'm having to teach people how to read a script, how to break down a call sheet, how to do everything before even doing the practical. And so that's very time consuming. So I wanted to do something to help that. And I started that last year. I didn't start it in a pandemic. I started it before. but it gave me the time to be able to work and hone in on it. And it was just the right time for me. So I've been able to help to teach hairstylists, barbers, makeup artists, wardrobe stylists, stunt performers, as well as still photographers, in how to be prepared for when they do work on sets. Because even though you get into the union, doesn't mean I'm going to hire you again if you don't know how to break down a script. I don't have the time to do that.
Laura, costume designers are often brought on early in the pre-production process to help set the look of the characters. Tell us about your process when you start a project.
So on any project, it always starts with the script, and the script really serves as a roadmap during the production. So whether it's a television show or a feature film, it always starts with the script. And so usually when I read the script first, just to kind of get the general idea of what I'm going to be embarking on, and then breaking down a lot of the details. Usually there's small, actual descriptive details about the characters, analyzing the dialogue to kind of get a sense of who these people are, because as a costume designer, I use fashion as a creative and narrative tool, not so much as like, oh, I'm just making something to look cool. It's
Sure.
How is this going to really further push what the film is trying to communicate to the audience, and who the characters are before they even speak. Then I'll make costume boards where it's my interpretation after these conversations, and I'll share them with the director, I'll share them with the production designer, I'll share them with the cinematographer, and ultimately I'll also share them with the actors as they come on board to the project. Because I can have this crazy idea for a character, and then the talent comes on board and they're like, well, actually I was thinking more like this. And it's really important that the person you're working with, who's going to be wearing the costume, feels that the costume really is intrinsic to what they were hoping to portray in the film or television.
Interesting.
Show, because it's a tool for them to immerse them in that world. And so really, honestly, the biggest compliment, which goes to what I was saying before, the biggest compliment is when an actor or actress says, wow, this really helped me understand who I am as the character. That's like, oh my God, I did it. It's really, very rewarding when when it's like, oh wow, this looks really cool. But as an artist, it feels much more, it's like it has a much more profound impact on the person who's going to be wearing it, or like you really get a sense of how it can help accentuate a scene, or
Sure, yeah. Andrew, Isaura is an animated story about a girl learning about climate change and ocean conservation. How did the Lucan team come up with this idea, and how did the country of Mozambique inspire it?
I think quite unsurprisingly, the idea came from a conservation project based in Mozambique, really remote island off of Mozambique called Ilha de Fogo, Fire Island, and it's a turtle conservation island, right? That's their core focus. It's like a breeding ground for turtles. And the idea started really small. So we were approached as an animation studio, and they said, great, so turtle conservation is at the core of the story that we want to tell, and the idea is that we want to take this to some of the more remote areas of Mozambique. So the idea was to create a mobile cinema experience. I mean, how cool, right? So get these massive overlander trucks, get screens that you can pop up over a weekend, and show a series of, I think the initial idea was like 6 episodes of around 8 minutes of animation, trying to educate youngsters about ocean conservation with the kind of edge of speaking about turtle conservation particularly. And very quickly, we realized that the story couldn't be isolated to this once-off experience given to very few. And we realized the potential of expanding our cast of characters and the conservation messaging outside of Mozambique. Ocean conservation is amazing and super important, but rhino poaching in Tanzania, the melting of the ice caps and the effect it has on polar bears, and deforestation and orangutans, and suddenly our cast of characters started expanding, and we had this epic story. The lore focused and created solely from pretty much African lore, And we decided that this could become the overarching law of the series. And we developed the series. We thought, obviously, like a limited run of 6 to 8 episodes is too few. The idea is too big. One season's not enough, guys. We've got to make a series, And so on the one hand, Mozambique inspired it for its lore because it's just so interesting. I don't think it's something that's been tapped into enough, and created the Isaura trailer, and that's what's kind of gained us the attention, and that's why I'm sitting on this panel. So.
Leo, I want to jump to you. You composed both seasons of Pen 15. How have the characters changed between both seasons, and how do you capture the lovely yet sometimes cringeworthy moments of life in middle school?
Middle school, Pen 15. Pen 15 is a crazy show on its surface. It's about two 13-year-old girls who are both played by mid-30s actresses playing these like fictionalized versions of themselves, but very based in their own experience. And everyone else in the show is actually 13. And so it sounds like a crazy sketch comedy show, but it is not at all. It is super very truthful in its approach to adolescence. It's very poignant at times. The big difference between season 1 and season 2, I would say simply, is that season 2 is much more darker and emotional in kind of where it takes those adolescent storylines, where the stakes of adolescent life are life or death, everything, whether the boy likes you, whether you're going to the dance, every single decision is just the biggest stakes ever. And that is it really ties into how we score the show, because the way they shoot it and write it has all these really exaggerated moments and montages. It's hyper cinematic to the point that it's almost an homage to a lot of old Hollywood movies. Ooh. And so that's what I get to do with the score. We have these it seems totally not what you would be you would hear, but it's all this old school 1940s, 50s, 60s orchestral music. A lot of season 2 has a lot of noir music. I was listening to a lot of Alex North and Jerry Goldsmith, and it's just this kind of really cinematic experience for this kind of hyper stylized, exaggerated story about adolescence.
Kabir, I want to jump back to you. 2 of your latest projects, Never Have I Ever and Julie and the Phantoms, which I'm a huge fan of, have diverse characters front and center. How important is it to you as a director to give these diverse characters a voice?
Finally, it's obviously, I think we all agree, it's way beyond the time that it stopped being surprising to do a show about a character who just is that, an ethnicity or has a backstory or a gender identity or whatever that we just haven't seen before, right? And you're seeing right now, last year, this year, a whole lot of this is the first show about, a person like this, a person who is this, which is, has been interesting to be in a situation where sometimes the feedback on these shows is they're yes, never have I ever a show about a brown girl. They're but that was not my brown girl story, some people have said. And I'm well, yeah, it's not, you can't represent I don't know, India's a country of 1 billion people, right? There are so many shows about just Midwestern, American families, but then now they're all diversified and different from each other. So I think it's exciting to be on the cutting edge of truly anything, and it feels a lot more risky, and there's a lot, it's not as safe to do, which I find more exciting to work on.
Sure.
But I think that at the end of the day, we're making stories about people. I definitely get calls a lot about working on projects now with brown protagonists, and I'm yeah, that's great, but also I'm from Philadelphia. I could do a lot more about
Sure.
I grew up here, so I'm I think that there are tons of stories to tell, but I also am not super excited about what's happening in terms of you're the right person to tell the story because you're like that. I'm I don't know if that's true. I know that's an obvious or unpopular opinion, but I just feel let's have a diversity of opinions, not a, homogeneous opinion.
Rhonda, kind of on the same topic, as Hollywood is now full on dealing with its terrible history of systematic racism, what do you hope will change?
The producers are the ones that were hiring. So when they hire, then the people hire their friends. But now the producers are understanding, okay, you have to have people of color, you have to have a diverse trailer now. You know, you have to have diversity because people, and I can say some of the actresses' name because they are always on the social media or on tweeting about they don't have enough people of color in the trailers, like Gabrielle Union and Yvette Nicole Brown and Halle Berry. They've acknowledged it, they've said it, and they're tired of it. So now we're being seen, I think, more than ever before in the trailers, and so many trailers are diverse. I'll talk to one of my girlfriends, say, what show are you on? And it's a non-Black show. And it's really good. It's a good feeling now to know that, you know, because we do everybody's hair. You know, so it's just a matter of getting into the trailers and being able to do everybody's hair and everybody's makeup. So it's a good thing now. It's a wonderful thing what's happening.
Bertie, how have you and your team managed to be so close to the wildlife while not interrupting their environment? And are there any techniques in your camera work that allow you to almost blend in with the animals and not disturb them?
Not disturbing the animals is always the sort of the primary goal, and that's because filming an animal running away, you know, filming its butt running to the horizon is, from a cinematography perspective, not particularly interesting. And also from a moral perspective, you know, our shows are supposed to get people stoked about the natural world, and we therefore, in making them, can't be, you know, chasing animals around and making them unhappy. In answer to the second part of your question, how do we actually do it? Well, there's two ways really to film wildlife. One is hiding so that the animals know that you're there. That's one strategy. The second strategy is habituation. So you're spending so much time with a wild animal that it accepts you as just part of the environment. And we have done that for a long time with our human selves, but now we have new technology, things like drones. They present new challenges. And I think it's, you know, drones have been given sort of a bad name, and people say drones disturb wildlife. And it's like, well, actually that's not true. The pilot's the one that disturbs the wildlife. Well, it completely depends on the individual animal. That's the other thing, is that people say, oh, polar bears are scared of drones, or, you know, brown bears are scared of drones. It's like, well, actually they're all such individuals. You know, in the same way that some of you guys, I'm sure, wouldn't mind being filmed with a drone, and some of you would mind.
So many things that you don't think about as the viewer, because you do such a good job. We're just watching it and we're in it, that we don't really think about kind of the process of it. All right, Laura, you've worked both on film and television projects. Are there any notable differences in your design process between either type of projects? Anything from research to the final presentation? Tell us.
The biggest difference between film and television is the speed, because in feature films, you're working with one script for a few months, you know, and, you know, that time always depends on the scale of the project. You know, it can be a couple of months to 5, you know, and television is you get a new script every week, you know, so you're having to dive into these characters every week. And so you're like, okay, so, you know, so it's a very different process. I personally prefer film, just because I have much more concentrated time to really dive into one story and really can bring out all the like small details of that. Television, however, is very exciting because you kind of get excited almost like a viewer every time you get a script, because you don't know what's going to happen. So,
Sure.
So, you know, you can be like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen this episode. And then, you know, just reading the scripts and kind of preparing for that can be really exciting. And so those are the biggest differences in terms of the process, you know, but for the most part, a lot of the base things are the same. You know, I go through the same process, you know, breaking down the script, kind of working it out. You know, in television, you kind of have your main cast at the forefront, and so you've really worked out their looks, and you can work out their arc through the series, or, you know, through the course of episodes, in the same way that you would on a film. That, you know, at the beginning of the film, they start out this way, they're going to end the film this way. You know, what's their journey? How are you going to showcase that through the costumes in the film? And so you do it, it's just a kind of different format.
All right, we're going to jump to Andrew. To create Isaura, the Lucan team used a mix of Photoshop, 2D and 3D elements, and more. Can you tell us about your animation approach and the collaboration process behind the series?
We knew that we wanted like a cinematic, high quality result, but we also know that we're a team of like 12 people. So like, how do you get that,
Sure.
And so the traditional approach is to create concept art and then build environments either in 2D or 3D based on that concept art. Didn't really have the luxury of doing both, So we created concept art with the notion that we'd use that to build out our environments. We said, well, what else can we do? Well, let's take a camera and let's just go film something outside, take the data from the camera, the track data, and just plug it in. Let's just do that. I mean, I'm making it sound really easy.
I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's just do that. That sounds great.
It's really not that easy. A lot of trial and error, but it has this quality. You've got an animator and you've got all these kinds of like wiggle effects and all these kinds of computer generated effects to give a lifelike quality to the animation, but nothing is quite like the real thing. So we would take cameras outside and just film stuff, track the data, pull it back into the 3D software, very accurately tracked. And it just gave, even if we were doing a tracking shot, which is just like, traditionally, you're on a dolly and it moves across a scene, but there's always inconsistencies in the track. It's always moving slightly. It's a heavy rig. Things are wobbling. There's a little bit of rotation. That's what we wanted, was this kind of like lifelike approach to it. And it gave us that ability, which is amazing. And so, we looked at an engine called Unreal Engine, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, which is unique in the way that it's got a cinematic quality to it, but it's also free. So that really piqued our interest. And it's free to use. It's got the cinematic quality. And it gives you something that's called like a real-time response. So you're looking at your final image and you're able to make like lighting changes, camera changes, like these massive changes that otherwise in a 2D, 3D pipeline, you would have to wait like a day to render. Rendering, don't even get me started. It's just like the bane of every 2D, 3D animator's existence. It takes hours to see the thing that you've been working on. Sometimes you're just working blind. You don't know what you've been doing. You see the render, you're like, oh, it's pretty bad. So that's kind of our existence, and so we developed this pipeline and created this lush kind of living, breathing world, and that was the approach we took, and pretty stoked about it. We got something that's really unique.
That's huge, though. That's insane. And that it started off as one thing and it grew into what it is now. Congratulations, sir. Congrats. Visual effects manipulate the eye into believing what is on screen is actually there, when in reality, it isn't. Johnny, tell us about the process of blending the physical world with the virtual world.
Sure. That is a very interesting question. It's a lot of fun. I think in many ways, we actually use some of the same techniques that Andrew was talking about just a moment ago. We very often rely on movement and the way that we make something move to be part of our integration. If any CG creature or tree or backdrop is not moving with the camera, or we're creating a completely virtual environment and the move feels very static and computerized, we've not really done our job. And so we're looking for inconsistencies to build in many ways, right? And a lot of what we do, from a computer perspective is often, it starts very sharp and we have to make it photographic, which to some degree, less so these days, but to some degree is still pretty degraded. And so degrading things, whether they're practical elements that are shot at a very high resolution or they're completely computer generated elements, we're often, making them dirty and then softening them up and then adding a little bit of noise or grain to them. That's kind of like the ABCs of integration. What is also really important is color process. And understanding what the final look is going to be of something and looking at it under those conditions so that what we're creating under those conditions looks photographic. Most of this is thanks to our artistic teams. our teams of compositors and lighters and texture artists and modelers, matte painting artists. Our artists each have their own way of approaching this exact thing. And the real feedback is when the creatives come in and say, oh yeah, that works, or no, that doesn't. You know, that's not what we were looking for. You covered it too much. Let's make it less sharp.
So the music of Cobra Kai is just so insanely cool if you haven't heard it. From the montages to the stadium rock and fighting sequences to the 80s inspired synthwave sounds, the music is absolutely amazing. Leo, you scored the show alongside fellow composer Zach Robinson. How did you guys give Cobra Kai its own sound separate from the original Karate Kid series?
That question is actually slightly similar answer in a little bit to what I was saying about Jurassic Park. Is like the first thing we had to do was think about the Karate Kid and like what it was about that movie that we thought audiences really responded to. And you know, that's a very beloved movie for a lot of people, especially like in their youth. And so I am kind of a believer that actually everyone says something like, can feel like the Karate Kid or sound like the Karate Kid, but they don't really know that score that well, the Bill Conti score, which is good, but like nobody can sing it, but it's got like a feeling. That is one pillar of the Cobra Kai sound. We kind of have this, we like to say like 3 sonic worlds that are Cobra Kai. Number one, and it starts out based on characters, and then from there we just go ham and start mixing them. Johnny, who's like kind of our main character, his sound is like 80s hair metal rock, arena rock. It is the score that he hears in his own head when he thinks he's being a badass or is being a badass. And in a lot of ways, that is kind of our backbone. Like when we're with Johnny or we're just like looking for some way to score a scene, 80s rock is like right there. Contrasting to that is our Daniel LaRusso sound, who being the, Miyagi student is based a little more in that mysticism, that orchestral sound, that there's some Japanese influence, which we try to get with like a few instruments, also with a lot of percussion. It's a lot of like percussion in traditional Japanese music, which is really exciting. But then what is kind of the most new territory for Cobra Kai is actually like the younger generation. Miguel, Hawk, Tori, Sam. And we wanted that to feel like fresher and more electronic, but also be steeped in the 80s. And it just so happens that like retro music is like in right now. Like retro and contemporary are like the same thing. So our sound for the kids is like retro synthwave, which Zach is really, really passionate about. So like I had this amazing opportunity to like learn from him. This synthwave thing, became the younger generation. But really, if you've seen the show, like there's no good guy, there's no bad guy. It is all like extreme shades of gray that are getting grayer and grayer and grayer as the show goes on. And also as the show goes on, like the score starts to get more operatic, I would almost say. Like I like to call it like symphonic synthwave, because like we start to mash up all of these sounds. So yeah, that's Cobra Kai.
Yes.
Awesome.
The passion, you guys, the passion involved. You're all clearly very established in your own sector of the entertainment industry. For audiences interested in working for film and television, what is your number one piece of advice? And this is the plot twist. So I'm giving you time right now to think about your answer, Johnny. I'm putting some filler in here. It has to be in one sentence.
I would say find what you want to do, go for it, and do more listening than you do speaking.
Shut up, sit down, and get a mentor.
Always persevere and make sure at the end of the day you're also taking care of your well-being while you pursue this industry.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
absolutely.
Very important.
That is very good.
Nice.
Keep in touch with everyone that you meet and try your best to develop an actual relationship with them.
Bertie, do you have a sentence for us that's going to inspire us?
Yeah, I'm going to go for do it.
Period.
That's taken.
Done.
I mean,
Mine is quite industry specific, in the way that any person who's aspiring to get into animation, they're like, should I get into animation? I'm like, yeah, but learn to love failure.
Leo, I'm gonna finish off with your one sentence.
I got one word.
Ooh, not even a sentence, just a
single word. And
wow.
I think it actually pulls together a lot of what we all just heard. Enthusiasm, period.
Do any of you guys have questions for each other? I see Bertie has a question here. Bertie, shoot.
So with wildlife film, you can only film what's in front of you. So this is for the, I guess, animation guys, Johnny and Andrew. Like, how do you know when to, like, how do you stop?
That's true.
You have to sleep at some point.
Yeah.
That's the limit.
I don't think it's ever done. At some point, you release it. You release it into the wild.
That's like an artistic philosophy, right? Like, is it ever really done, or are we just out of time?
That's the thing. When you're constantly tweaking an image that you've created, where every element, if it's pure animation, every element of that image has been created. Mm-hmm. There's so many points that it could have been bettered, at concept phase, at taking it into animation, at finishing. There's so many phases, but I think, like, for us at least, like, an accurate is deadline.
Deadline, exactly.
Kind of overarching, time management. I mean, that ties straight into my question for you, John, which is, what's the longest you've stayed up on a deadline?
Probably not as long as some of my colleagues, actually. I'm pretty sure it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 hours straight. Yeah. But that was once, and I never did it again. And I would never recommend anybody do that, because that is not taking care of yourself. You need your sleep and your rest and your self-care to be creative. Otherwise, you are wasting your time and spinning your wheels. Staying up late is not necessarily always the right approach. Sometimes it's going to bed and coming back in the morning and being able to work quickly because you've had time to think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Laura's sentence coming full circle there.
Yeah. We have a nice saying, which is, you're useless after 10 p.m.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I cannot agree with that more.
Save and then, like, make a copy and keep working on this, and then hours later you'll be like, oh, the next day you'll be like, actually, we were fine here. We should have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's, like, studies about when you're sleeping, your brain does all this, like, background processing. So if you have, like, a problem in front of you right before you go to bed, rather than just sitting there hammering out at the problem in the wee hours, like, you will come up with such a better solution the second you sit down in the morning, even if you only got, like, a few hours of sleep. Yeah.
And like, our productivity is so much better early in the morning. All your best decision making is done early in the morning. Those first 3-4 hours, you're getting your prime time. So save it for then, 100%.
Yeah, Bertie, I would add that, when I was editing full time, I used to always put a little chart on the wall in my office over many, many offices. I just drew it over and over. That as time goes on, the quality of a project changes in 3 distinct phases. We start here and we work on it, and it gets better and better and better. And then at some point we start changing and it becomes different, and it's still becoming different. And then at some point we start making it worse, and then we stop. So ideally you stop while you're making it different, but it definitely happens that this happens. You're like, okay, we should actually put it away now.
Yeah. That stressed me out a little bit. That's like gambling. How long can we push it?
Too long, man. All of us have worked on things that have, aired or screened, and then we're like, oh, it was a little bit better. A few little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been great. It's been, if that's it, that's it. You guys, I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you to our panelists, Kabir, Laura, Andrew, Leo, Rhonda, Johnny, and Bertie for being here with us today to discuss their incredible work. Also, thank you to Impact 24 PR for putting this panel together, and shout out to the amazing Comic-Con International team and to all of you for watching. You can check out the social media handles for our awesome panelists in the description below, and be sure to share your thoughts on social media using hashtag SamBehindTheCamera and tag us at at Impact24PR. See you all next time. Bye, guys.
Till next time. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
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 Thank you.